There are countless ways to try to arrange the world around us to find happiness with the work we do, the relationships we have, how we spend our time, the food we eat, the routines, exercise routines we do, the hobbies we engage in, countless ways. But the Buddhist teachings are about focusing inwardly, developing our mind in positive ways to find greater happiness and well-being, rather than relying on external factors. The two are not mutually exclusive, but looking outwards is a bit of a gamble, isn't it? Because we can't control all the conditions that influence external conditions. We never really know how those external conditions will turn out. There's so many things beyond our control. So nothing external can guarantee our happiness. Also, these external things are impermanent. They're constantly changing. Whereas every moment that we spend cultivating our own hearts and minds in a positive and meaningful way, that's not a gamble. That's actually more like an investment. It's a sure thing because of the internal law of cause and effect. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama often says that the best way to improve our minds and hearts is to cultivate altruism, and that means cultivating compassion and bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, the mind that wishes to achieve awakening for the benefit of all beings. And in fact, all the great yogis and scholars, the great lamas and teachers, consistently say that the best way to improve our minds, our mental qualities, is to cultivate bodhicitta. Not just for this life, but for future lives as well. And as I mentioned the other night, bodhicitta is one of the healthiest, sanest minds we can have. Why? Because it's based on compassion, great compassion. And compassion is synonymous with non-harmfulness. It's the wish for all beings to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. Over the centuries, many great leaders have espoused the practice of ahimsa or nonviolence. And His Holiness says that from a Buddhist perspective, nonviolence is not just the absence of violence. Rather, it's something much more positive and meaningful. The fuller expression of nonviolence is compassion, this practice of compassion. And so genuine compassion develops when we accept others as being just like us, wanting to be free of suffering, wanting to find happiness. And that happiness and freedom of suffering is a basic human right for all of us. Our compassion grows when we develop a genuine concern about someone else's experience of difficulty or pain and suffering. And so really to be fully human, then we must be able to imagine another person's suffering and relate to it as if it were our own. And that's not always easy. Sometimes we get irritated when people suffer, or our own buttons are pushed. Usually our compassion is biased, something we only extend towards those who are close to us, certainly not towards enemies, and occasionally we might extend it towards a stranger. But unbiased compassion is a state of mind that can easily be developed with consistent practice. And naturally, once there is this unbiased compassion, focused towards everyone, concern for others, then there's a feeling of responsibility that comes with it. There's an active interest in the well-being of all members of our communities and even concern for the health of our planets. So what's interesting is that all world religions value the cultivation of compassion. And as we've seen in our text, the Lam Rim and also Guide to the Bodhisattva's A Way of Life, there are these benefits, huge benefits to cultivating compassion. I imagine that they're limitless, but typically there's this list of 10 that's given. And Amazon lists over 21,000 books with the word compassion in the title. And Googling research on compassion brings up over 48 million results. It's quite phenomenal. Not only that, but our own Abbess, Venerable Choden, has given countless teachings on the benefits of compassion and bodhicitta. Since last October, she's given 18 teachings on these two methods for cultivating compassion, sevenfold instruction, and equalizing and exchanging self with others. And members of the Sravasti community have done many reviews. As I looked on the web, there are actually many reviews on how to develop equanimity, how to develop each of these methods. And so at the end of the very nice review last night on bodhicitta by Venerable Samten, she posed the question. She said the benefits for developing compassion and bodhicitta are so obvious for this life and future lives. why is it, she was talking about herself. She said, why am I not on this practice day and night? And it's something, I thought it was a good question. So it reminded me of some teachings that I'd been involved with when I was in Australia. And um, in those teachings, I posed this opportunity to the students. I said, let's do a social experiment. Let's actually experiment with cultivating our heart. And, if you're willing, of course, it's your choice. It's an experiment involving practice. And so I proposed that we make a sincere commitment to meditate on the topic of bodhicitta with an emphasis on compassion in the coming weeks. Maybe the next 2 weeks until the compassion retreat that's happening here at the Abbey and beyond, if people are interested, if you find it beneficial. And as part of our experiment, I invite you to fill out what's called a compassionate scale inventory as a baseline, just as a measure to see where we are in our level of compassion. And then revisit that in a few weeks to check our development. It asks us to rate a series of statements about ourselves on a scale from not true at all to being very true for ourselves. So there's statements like, I spend a lot of time concerned about the well-being of those close to me. I would rather suffer myself than see someone close to me suffer. If given the opportunity, I'm willing to sacrifice in order to let the people important to me achieve their goals in life. I accept friends and family members even when they do things I think are wrong. I try to put myself in my friend's shoes when he or she is in trouble. Now, when I sent this around last night, and Venerable Children got a copy, and so she posed the question back to me, well, this seems like it's only talking about friends. And so I think we could go through this scale and actually include, okay, friends, strangers, and enemies. And we could do it 3 times and see where we are. And it would be, I think it would bring a very stark result, just so we can see where we are. And then we can follow any of the myriad methods for cultivating compassion. Lama Tsongkhapa suggests a very simple 4-part process for cultivating compassion. First developing compassion towards ourselves with the lines, may I be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And just repeating those slowly to ourselves and really thinking about, okay, well, what is suffering? What levels of suffering do I experience? We have to understand that first, don't we? And also, what are the causes of my suffering? And from a Buddhist point of view, that comes back to not other people, but our own afflictions and past actions. So we begin with ourselves. May I be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. Then we cultivate compassion towards friends. May my friend so-and-so be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. Staying with that repetition and until we get some change, some feeling, some warmth. Even you can tell some warmth in the heart. And then extending it towards someone we might consider a stranger, someone we've passed on the road, someone you've seen at Costco this morning, or someone who's in front of you at the line at the bank. And then finally thinking of someone specific that we find challenging. I think most people cringe when you say, think of an enemy. We'd probably all want to say, I don't have any enemies. Some difficult people I can think of. Some challenging people I can certainly call to mind. Enemies, I don't have any. So we call to mind those people who we find challenging and think even they want happiness, want to be free of suffering. So can we wish this for them as well? That's just, one of myriad ways of meditating on compassion. Meanwhile, we can use our life, our own mind as the laboratory to investigate whether meditating on compassion is worth our time and effort. And if you have no idea how to meditate on compassion, or you'd really like to give your practice a boost, then there's a wonderful weekend opportunity coming up the end of this month. There's a retreat here called Developing Compassion in Difficult Times, put on by some of the monastic community. So I took your challenge seriously last night. I invite all of us to take this invitation seriously. Compassion is like the bedrock of Buddhist practice, non-harming. And so each of us can rise to the challenge to the degree that we feel compelled. And you can find this compassion scale on the website, or I'm not sure how we'll post it, but we'll find a way. Okay, good luck.